Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Greg Sterling. I'm with David Mim and Mike Blumenthal, as always, every week as we discuss the most interesting developments of the week or whatever's at top of mind, depending on how we feel. And today is a little bit more like that. I just got back. I went to I'm not initiating my portion here. I'm just teasing it. So I was at a conference this week and it was pretty weird, and I'll be talking about that a little bit later. But first, we're going to have the serious item today, which is David's discussion of the impact of some of the privacy changes that Apple's making on email and email analytics and the perceptions of email's viability as a marketing tool going forward. So.
Sure. So there were a lot of stories this week around the WWDC event earlier that Apple talked about some of these upcoming changes, and a couple of them in particular where I wish I could remember the source on this, but a full frontal assault on marketers, and one of these changes is going to make for the death of email marketing, and I'm reminded of the Mark Twain quip that his death was greatly exaggerated when it was reported in the paper on one of his trips to Europe. So,
so before you get into the debunking that, let's explain what the impact is.
Sure. So as I understood it anyway, the announcement was that effectively Apple was going to sort of start pre-screening emails, which would require them to effectively open them to fire the tracking pixel that a lot of emails from all kinds of email service providers, MailChimp, HubSpot, whatever, they all typically include a tracking pixel to understand if a subscriber has opened the email, and that Apple's new implementation will essentially fake and open, so that those pixels are going to fire just on a send, essentially, to anyone who's opening on an Apple in an Apple Mail client. So that was really interesting. My take is that open rates are sort of like a vanity metric, right? They're akin to the number of likes that your Facebook page has or something like that, where they're not really where the rubber meets the road when it comes to emails. I think that they're directionally important, right? You'd want to know if your open rates started at 50% and this week they're at 15%. You're probably either sending too frequently, or the content you're sending is really crappy. But they never should have been your sort of be-all, end-all metric. I think a much more important metric is, are you sending interesting content? Are your subscribers actually clicking on what you're sending? And as far as I can tell, the announcement doesn't impact the ability for email service providers to track clicks, which are typically done on a campaign ID and a subscriber ID basis. So not to say that Apple couldn't come after those at some point, but that didn't seem to be part of this announcement.
The one thing they did announce, though, which is the Apple Cloud Plus Privacy Initiative, which essentially runs all web traffic through anonymous servers, essentially anonymous servers, so that location of clicks can no longer be tracked. So there is some loss of analytics data at the same time, even if there is a tracking number, which I'm all in favor of. And nobody wrote about the end of analytics, though, even though they're going to be totally hosed with these changes.
I mean, if you look at the market holistically, I mean, now with Google sort of aping Apple's kind of ad ID moves to some degree, I mean, there's a holistic encroachment on the not credibility, but the accuracy of analytics, the availability and accuracy of analytics across the board.
Right. And I guess my analogy, which I mentioned on Twitter, was it's not like SEO isn't valuable because it's way harder to track than paid search, right? It's not like email is all of a sudden less valuable. It's just harder to track. So we're just going to have to do a better job of figuring out what content is resonating and making sure we're sending good content and all those things. And I also think that there's still plenty of opportunity for email as a conversion mechanism, even if Apple starts discontinuing click-throughs for tracking, right? If you have a code that you need to redeem at checkout or things like that, you're still going to find that email is one of the most effective channels for you. So I just thought it was a typical sort of tech press week in terms of fawning
Hysteria.
over every major announcement, whether it's Apple or Google or Amazon or whoever, and overhyping whatever the impact of that announcement was, or at the very least misframing what the announcement actually means. So,
well,
I was just going to say, mobile traffic has largely been dark in analytics for a while, right? We don't know which app they're using. We don't know a lot about them. And as a result, people underestimate obviously one of the biggest spending populations in the world, which is iPhone users. And because we can't see them that clearly, to some extent, it gives Google a leg up because we can see the traffic that's coming from Maps or from local or from the website and et cetera. And we can't quite see it as clearly from Apple. And so a lot of people don't focus as much on it. But I think all of this is going to get further muddied together. And we're going to have to come up with new techniques across the board, not just with email.
Just a quick point on the viability of email. I mean, consistently in surveys, consumers said email was one of the primary channels that they respond to most. I mean, it continues to be something that people are receptive to and that they're engaged with, provided that the content is good, as you say. So, simply because it can't be tracked as accurately doesn't mean that it shouldn't continue to be used. You got to focus on the customer and not necessarily on the dashboard,
Well said.
Okay, and now to Mr. Dashboard himself, Mike Blumenthal.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.